Alright everybody, I have something really different for you. I have a few blog posts that show me painting in 2D, but this time we're going to paint in 3D on a video. Couple reasons I want to do this. First and foremost, I'm going to take it to, I believe, this is what I want to get to right here. So I did this. This is actually another pet portrait, and as I scroll down here, you see I'm using these are a little bit different paints than what I use now, because this was several years ago. But you can recognize those brushes there, and you recognize this. So what I want to show you is blocking in, just like I do on a miniature. I just call it shaded base coat, because blocking in, I think, means different things to different people. So as I scroll down here, you can see the palette's pretty limited. We're using the big bold brush strokes. And now you see we start to build off of those initial layers, just like we would do in, what do I talk about, refinement. Here we start to add refinement. Harder edges, more definition around the eyes, the nose, more fur. But all the while you can see those initial base layers, those are still there. So we're going to continue to scroll down here. Look, I've even moved the eye a little bit. You can see more shading in the eye, some more burnt umbers and burnt siennas are added, some more dark colors, more highlights. And then this is our finished result here. So you can see this is pretty much how I approach miniatures, but just in 2D this time. Speaking of 2D, I have lots of 2D art on the blog, but you can see this is from a previous day when I used to have a shop at a Renaissance fair and used to sell art there. So now all the stuff that you see here, this has been sort of transferred to miniatures. And I used to paint a lot of spacescapes also. Let's go to this. So you've got your final image there. As we scroll down, you see just the initial little sketch. And you're just going to see, again, the big, bold strokes here, just blocking things in, just to, guess what, cover that white canvas that we talk about. And this actually, well, it's a piece of canvas board, but still a piece of canvas. So see here, we've got the light of the planet behind. So we've got a dark mountain here, but then we have the light as the planet gets to the darker side. So you can see that play out a little bit more here. You can see there's muted blues there versus stronger. See how much more saturated that blue is on that side of the mountain. I know you can't see my cursor. So contrast of line, edge, values, saturated versus unsaturated, all the same things that happen in the miniature painting that you see me do. But they're in 2D, and then we start to add a few, say, refinements here on the landscape in front of it. So that was 4 years ago. So I just wanted you to see those different elements there. I just thought that could be interesting for you. So we'll go back to our reference photos here. You got one over here on the left, one over here on the right. Unfortunately, the cat is no longer with us. That's going to join, sadly, the Dead Pet Gallery. I've painted several of these in the past. And I thought, for the heck of it, I'll use the new paints, Creature Caster and Slow Fuse Gaming, teamed up on these. You've seen me use these in a few other videos, and yeah, it's just, we're going to explore the range of browns and blues. I think this is mahogany here. Some umbers, right? Nothing fancy. We've got, I think this is the one skin color here. We've got sort of a yellow ochre, basically, in this. So we'll put these out on the palette. The brushes, huge change, I know. Oh, look, the craft brushes, the filbert brushes, makeup brush. I like these. You can get a set of about a dozen of these for $5. Even bigger versions of the number 8 rounds. These are 12s, because, hey, look at this. Filbert to chisel. Now, I had to really play some games here with the focus on the camera, because, well, this is a whole lot bigger than a miniature. So you can see this is a canvas board. It's a little bit stiffer. It's got some texture to it. Usually I would paint these on a piece of watercolor board, but I don't have any of that, but I do have some of this. So we're just going to make do with what we've got, and we'll spend a few hours showing how those 2D things, how I used to approach that. And then you'll maybe get a little more of an idea of how they've influenced my 3D stuff. So we're going to put the paints out on the palette, and we'll be back with blocking in those shapes in a second. So as promised, we're going to get going with blocking in those colors. Now the backdrop that you see over here, we're going to lose that. We're going to basically combine the two of these. So I wanted to do the one on the left there because I thought it could show a little bit more in the way of fur. So let's think about something for a backdrop here that's a little bit muted. And you'll see an awful lot of water in the paint there. And yes, this is not just acrylic paint, it is miniature paint. And you can hear that. That's the sound of paint scraping against the canvas board there. And we're just gonna grind this in. It's a little bit like remember the pre-shading, glazing stuff that I do on the oil painting videos. I originally had hoped to do this as an oil painting video, but sometimes you just don't get to do the things you'd like to do. Time was a factor. So we're just going to get this over here. And you notice how it undulates a little bit between light and dark. I also wanted to torture test these paints a little bit more because, hey, we haven't tortured them enough. Let's do a little more. So this is where this is something I like to do here. I think you saw it on the painting of the German Shepherd. We're just going to have that sort of disappear right there. I still got my sponges here. Guess what? I can do stuff like this if I want, whatever. But now we've just got some things happening here in the backdrop. I'll try and keep this out of the way of the palette so you can see what it is that I'm doing, but let's start to just mark out some areas here. So we've got to fill up this canvas with a Maine Coon cat. And what I want to do is just start placing shapes. So I can already see I'm probably going to need to move that tail to make room for a leg. And because this is still wet, I still blend this a little bit. You notice I'm using the side of the brush. That's why I like these filbert brushes so much. And let's see, so we have all of this over here that we can do. Looks like we have a little bit of a front leg here. And I'm going to grab some of my original colors again here. This is that making adjustments, modifications, and this will be the same unholy mess that you're used to seeing with the miniatures. So it should be just like old habit for you. But you notice, and sorry if the camera shakes because, well, this is pretty vigorous what we're doing here. Actually, I'm not quite used to having the texture of a canvas like this, so this is pretty fun to have. And see, all I'm doing here is just figuring out where things are. And I'm not really worried about drawing in any lines. All I'm interested in is just general shapes. Now, this cat was, again, it was a Maine Coon, a really long-haired Maine Coon. So lots of fur. There's lots and lots of fur happening here. And yeah, we'll do this. And I'm just trying to position things. And yeah, I still have these guys. which means I can do this. You know, here where you've got the face, I can even manipulate this straight away. You can see now I'm starting to get a little bit different. There we put in a lot of red there. We need to start to eventually push this towards orange. And we'll do that now. That's why I've got the orange sitting right here. And see just a little touch of that. It already starts to change that around a little bit. And face here definitely is going to need some shots of orange there. So you can see at this point, directional strokes. I think you've heard me talk about those more than once on miniatures. You can see that is not a big deal at this point, but one thing I definitely want to do is not have too much in the way of a hard edge in some of these places. So as you can see, I'm going to kill that a little bit. One thing I'll get to do more here that I don't usually get to do when I'm working on 2D or 3D stuff is negative painting, and that's going to be in areas, say, here. So that's something you'll see later on in the process. Here we go. You can see I'm starting to add a little more of the orange and yellow. It's becoming a little bit brighter, and you can see just starting to add something in the way of directional strokes. We're softening edges in some places. And then just push this. Push it here. I just wanted to see also what this paint would do when it was pushed. I haven't... you saw the paints. There was a collection of basically anything I could find. Some Privateer Press, some GW, whatever. And that's alright, my voice is a little gravelly. It's just, again, it's been really cold here. The air is dry, so that is going to affect how I sound. Now I need to find her other ear. Sorry, that is. And we're looking for eyes here. Looking for the side of the head, and I can see that it needs to be bigger. So these are those adjustments. As I look at that, the head, so this body over here, I either have to shorten this or expand this, and we want to make the head a little bit bigger instead of shrinking the body. So basically this line right here, the way I measure it out, so we're going to measure out here, here, now we're about, that's the equidistant we're looking for. And with each layer that's added to this, see, we can, it's just, there's something starting to happen here. We're starting to get a little bit of a face. And that's going to need some blue in it there. And I can do my little finger painting routine like I always do. Now the picture also on the left is going to be a little bit darker. It's just more in shadow. And we're going to darken this down a little bit. So you'll see a lot of wet into wet blending here also. And I know there's going to be another paw under here. And I think we've got a front leg over here. I think I'm going to have to put out some more of my umber eventually. But now I've got a little darker color mixed up here. And she definitely had the classic kind of pointy ears, as you might say. Now let's make sure that this is where you can see it. And we're going to work in some more darks over here. And over here, now under the face, definitely need some darks. And this is going to be a little bit of that negative painting also. But you can see start to take in some of those directional strokes here where the leg is supposed to be. Over here on this end, you can see how I just fluff that out just as if it was fur. You can see how many times I've cleaned my brush, which is hardly any. You probably recognize that from the miniature painting side of things. Here, let's get even more of this out here. Let's go with a touch of orange on that. And you'll see this develop more and more. Again, I'm sorry I can't move the camera back any farther. I think I've mentioned many times that I'm trying to save up for basically a second filming station, and that would allow me to do things that are bigger like this, so that you guys can see that better. You can see more of it all at once. Let's get a few light things here. So all we're trying to do is just sketch this out. I know there's just so many different phrases that people use for this stuff. Here I'm just gonna take this and kind of go down like so. I'm gonna go back into some of this, some of my original background color here. And this is something that I can go over the top of. Again, here's another, just a quick layer to tone that down. And we can even go the opposite way. And we can go a little bit lighter. So this stuff really does do pretty well as far as wet into wet. Yeah, look at that. And again, I'm sorry if the focus gets a little wonky here. That could very well happen. This is definitely, it wasn't something that I anticipated as far as filming with this camera setup. It just happened to be something I thought you might like to see. So here we're doing that same negative painting over here. And with the idea that this just starts to disappear. And we're going to do the same thing right here. Like so. So a lot of this is just, it's making modifications. Let's go over here. We need to darken this down too. There's just too much light over here. Let's grab a little bit of that yellow ochre. Because if that paw was looking too much like it was just kind of suspended in the air. So I'm just going to let that drizzle down like that. There's almost some watercolor properties to these paints. And again, these are the, oh, I forget what the heck they call them. Pro acryl, whatever. You know me with paint names. Well, there's a more colorful phrase I could use, but we'll just say that I don't care what something's called. Let's just stick with that. So, again, rapidly moving around. So I'm going to get some more of that dark umber, whatever that's called. Nope, that's black. Here it is. Cool black. I think this is what it is. We'll find out. Nope, that wasn't the one I was looking. Here it is. Dark umber. That's the one I'm looking for. So we're going to do that now. It's got a little bit of orange in it. And there's some darks there. Some darks here. And gonna move that down a little bit, soften that edge. Almost create a little bit of a shadow here. So I'm gonna start to add something that's a little bit darker. And you're gonna notice I just add a little bit of that blue to it, because I can see bluish gray in some places here, and it's also going to see how it's going to enhance the contrast a little bit. Not just going to make it darker, but also changes the color. There we go. So we're toning that down a little bit. And this is also going to be covered up by subsequent layers, so you won't see as much of it. That's why I can kind of go a little bit more heavily into that, because we know there's going to be other layers on top of that. So let's see, I think I need to... This is again another shift that I'm doing here. Changing this around. Moving this out. And we've got some shadow over here. Let's get going with this. And I'm just going to indicate, that classic sort of M shape there. All I want to do is just get a bead on where that should be. And again, we're going to refine. We're going to use a smaller brush. So just stay with me here. For those of you that are new to this, I'm sure you're absolutely shocked and horrified at what you see. Now, in this area, I see some of this almost greenish type color, and that's why it's being added in there. And here we go. Got some down here. Like so. As you saw in the painting of that German Shepherd, there was a lot of bluish gray added in there. There's a bunch of it. And we're just gonna go in here now. This is the, and this brush looks tiny. This is one of those number 8 round crap brush. You can see this is darn near watercolor paint here at this point. It's that liquid. And these are not any kind of final highlights or whatever. I'm just trying to, like I've said before, find my way around this. I've seen the cat many times, but obviously this is the first time we're trying to paint the cat. And that's really a different prospect right there. So let's get this, trying to lengthen the nose just a touch. And you just start to see, alright, remember that bluish stuff we were adding before? We're going to add a touch of it here to make that more of a bluish gray. On right there. So it's just a touch of grayish color here. And over here too, so we're going to be darkening that down. And we're going to expand off of this. You can tell on the picture on the upper right, see even there you can see it's sort of a whitish, cooler beard. I'll just call it that. And now with the blue, we're going to start to say, all right, just how big should these eyes be? We're gonna shrink that down a little bit. Right. Only a couple times have I gone in there and reached for anything resembling white. Well, look at how light that was right there that I just added. You can see the dramatic difference that made. Yeah, nowhere near their lightest color there. So, and consider that this is all, like we've talked about, this is all in that shaded base coat realm. So as I see this line, so I'm looking at that, this thing here, so the mouth almost needs to come here. So we're going to shift that all over. Shift that over this way. Shift it over this way, like so. And even maybe part of the eye a little bit, widen this out maybe. You can see as I just make my adjustments on the fly. I try to encourage people to do this all the time. I obviously try to practice that in as much as I preach it. Now let's grab some of our background color here. Look at how I'm just scumbling the brush along here. And again, some of that bluish gray here. And now we know we've got that dramatic dark underneath there. Like this. So look at the impact that this has. This has some of that blue in it, some of the dark umber. Huge impact that has. And now again, looking at the reference there's a little bit of blue, there was a little bit of green in the eyes. And obviously, when you're doing any kind of a portrait, it's the same thing pretty much for a miniature too. You know, those eyes really are the most important thing. They are just such a focal point. So you can see the tufts that were off the ears there. Almost a little bit like a bobcat. But all the while, I've got to keep in mind not to get too wrapped up in any kind of details at this stage. And, you know, that classic M shape there. Because remember, all the refinements, those all happen later. And sometimes, yeah, I may have to let things dry for a bit, even though these are acrylic paints. So let's get some of these dark colors here, but what I don't want to do is lose my underpainting there. And now I'm really using the reference in the upper right hand corner a little bit more. Let's dig into a little orange here. And we're going to make that right there. Again, trying to stay away from diving into that white. You can see the difference that even just adding this yellow makes. And with each permutation here, so let's get just a touch of something that's a little more gray here. All right. And essentially what I'm trying to do here is make that focal point that we're talking about and then sort of fan out from there. All right, I need to get a little bit orange in here. Yeah, that's better. So that's a little of the mahogany and that orange. And you notice here, looks like dry brush. It's not dry brush. I'm just utilizing the surface of the canvas there. So I can just sort of dust over the top of it, and now I'm going to make sure I have a touch of green here. So again, really keeping in mind the image that's on our upper right hand corner there. Like so. And I don't want to equally lighten every single area here. It starts to look a little bit more like a cat face and less like whatever it was looking like before. Because I know you were panicking, weren't you? You were saying, what in the world is he doing? That's just not working out. I can hear you saying that somehow through the lost portal of time here between when I film this and when you watch it. But you see how in that one in the upper right hand corner, how it sort of goes from that white into almost like a bluish white, or a yellowish white into a bluish white. So we're going to try and capture that a little bit here. And you know how I do those feathered brush strokes? Well, we're doing that here. Like that. Not worried about whiskers and all that kind of stuff yet. All right, let's get a little bit of that blue in there to make sure we don't lose that gray. And now a little more of that mahogany to add into here. And over here. So what I'm going to do is, at a certain point here in the next 5-10 minutes, I'll stop this because we've got a decent shaded base coat here. Now we've mapped out a lot of colors. We've started to, in general, figure out where we want the face to be, the features of the face, all of those most important things. Again, not worrying about finished details or whatever yet. And I'm just going to keep moving around here. And with each time I work on this a little more, you'll see more of these directional strokes come out. See how I work in this pattern? Just out like that. Maybe not quite with the sound effects, but I think you get what I mean. And I'm just going to start to layer up these effects, and basically the fur just kind of shoots out almost like a starburst. Yeah, let's warm this up a touch. Yeah, like so. I really do want the warmest colors to be on the face for obvious reasons. See, and now we're going to do a little bit of lost edge right here. We need a little bit of an eyebrow, sort of. So I'm really liking these as acrylic paints just for 2D. The last time I used miniature paint for 2D, I kind of liked it actually, but these are really fantastic as 2D paints. And I don't know, maybe at the end of the video here I'll show you some sketches that I never got a chance to paint. Basically, the 2D art industry for us just kind of died away years ago. And I think it was 2003 officially when miniatures took the place of 2D art. And there was a variety of reasons for that. If you check out the blog, I go over that a little bit too. So I'm going to have to change the angle of this a little bit so that I can see it. Because what happens is I get a little bit of a reflection from the glossiness of the paint. Doesn't stay glossy for long. See, we're doing this again. We're just basically taking advantage of the texture of the canvas. And we're going to find some shadow here, like this. And I'm just using the side of the brush, scumbling that. That's not something you'd probably want to do with your Winsor Newton Series 7. But hey, I can do it with these. And yeah, so this works really nicely as, because I can just kind of add that in a watercolory way. There's another interesting term. But all the while, just keeping in mind, save some of the brightest stuff, those bright highlights, save those for the end. There we are. And some more light over here. Back to, see, we were just scumbling with this brush a second ago, and yeah, I want to have a touch of blue in there, just a touch of blue. Now we're going to go back in with a little bit of that yellowish color. See, I'm actually pushing it around, I'm moving it a little bit. Because her face, to see the reason I like the picture in the lower left is that's how I always saw her face, kind of that whiter, fluffier look. And being a Maine Coon cat, boy oh boy, she had this habit of walking up by these big old wooden chairs in their kitchen, and she would rub up against those, and well, Maine Coons are large cats, and she was a big Maine Coon, and the entire chair would just kind of move across the floor. So that gives you a little bit of an indication of just how big she was. So say we just changed the backdrop there a little bit. Again, it's all part of this initial blocking out of colors and shapes. So we're going to call this a shaded base coat right here. And what we'll do is, maybe, I don't think we really need to put new paints out there, but we're going to start to do more refinement on, say, the face and other parts of the fur back here. So we'll be back with that in a little second. Let's continue with our cat portrait here. And this time we emphasize more of the details. We start to sharpen things up and we start to put things in there we haven't had before. Like say we have the nose here. Obviously need to make that a little on the pinkish side. This is where I start to really analyze whatever reference photos I might have. And this is obviously the eyes are really, really important for portraits for, I mean, just all the obvious reasons. But there's other things to these markings here. This M that's on the top of the head here, that varies with certain breeds of Mancoon. I didn't realize there was many different types. There's small Mancoons, big Mancoons, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things I don't know about Mancoons that I'll probably eventually learn. Now let's get into the eyes here, because again, we have not added any kind of lighter color whatsoever, so I'm just mixing a touch of white. But now I'm going to move one of my lights out of the way here. That's getting in my way. And good, I think you can see that. And so see how we're just starting to add a little more in the way of lights to the bottom portion of the iris here. Not everywhere, because we want some shadow there. Now, speaking of the pupils, let's see if we can't. I'm going to add a little blue into that, because they're already dark, but we need something that we don't want to just be these flat, dark things. In fact, I'm just going to grab a dot of blue right here and throw that in there. And then next to it, a little touch of that. Still not going to go in there with any kind of white yet. I don't want to do that because I need to see what's happening over here with this bit. So again, I'm using 2 reference photos. I know there was an ideal photo that's somewhere, either on my phone or on a computer somewhere, that I'd always thought would be fun to make a painting of. See, look at this, what we're doing here on this bottom part. See, I've got what's underneath already. See, I just put this, gives that impression of fur. And what's underneath is completely, totally dry. I know there's a lot of obsession with wet blending and everything else lately. Well, not everything has to be wet blended, especially if you are careful in the way you plan out your lights and darks and midtones and what's underneath. So I see this has to move up a touch. And with each detail that I add, so see what I'm going to do here. I'm actually starting to add brush strokes that are directional right there. So some more in here. Don't want to forget my orange. And we're going to work a little of that in there. We've got some light on this side of the nose to work in. And heck, if it starts to get too light, well, I can knock that down. And I can always wipe some of it away. I can glaze over the top. There's just any number of things that I can do. Lots of options. There's always, again, certain options that are open. Now that's a little more on the grayish side, so I'm going to grab that blue. Look at how dark that is, how dark that seems. But yet when I put it here, it looks almost light. But I'm not wiping out that orange that's underneath. We're keeping that. And this is what I try and preach every time I'm doing the videos. Something just told me that maybe if I did this in more of a two-dimensional form, you might really be able to see it. And now, see, this is where we start to add more of this type of detail. I'm not painting every single piece of fur in there, just going after a few little bits here and there, a little bit here and there. Because we still have more room as far as adding lights. And even that white you see on the palette, well, that's not really, even that's not completely white. That's ivory. I think it's bright ivory is what it's called. And now we were gonna use a little bit of that here. And see, as I work this down, we get a little, it starts to look like a fur texture as opposed to painted on. I don't even know how to phrase it. You notice I'm working a little less liquid at this point. You can also see that, well, guess what's my finest brush that I've used so far? It's the number 8 round craft brush. And slowly but surely, the face begins to emerge. Well, maybe not so slowly. Actually, it's been reasonably quick. And let's keep going here. As we start to add, these are some of the kind of secondary whiskers there. And what I am going to do now is not quite white. And I'm going to just position these pretty much where I see them on the upper right. This is what gives the eyes that bit of a glossiness to them. And then what I'm going to do is put even a little more blue in there to almost like a little bit of secondary light there to give the eyes a little more of a shimmer, I suppose you might say. Now let's go back to some darks and get a little more definition here. And I'm adding texture in there just by what I'm painting around it. It's a different take on the negative painting. And you can see by not cleaning the brush, see I'm starting to get some extra little colors there. Let's do some up here too. I see a little bit of grayish color in some of the ears. And even here as we go up to, and you can see now, again, more texture is added with each of these little brush strokes. But it is still as subtle as I can make it. And this is just going to be a lost edge there. We're not going to actually paint that in. We'll just have that sort of disappear. got some of the fur on the back here. And obviously, all of this can apply to, if you're doing a miniature of a cat, that'd be just a teensy bit smaller than this. But the same rules apply. Cat's a cat, whether it's 3D or 2D. You're going to want to do the same thing where this has a little more of a bluish gray to it. Now this is pretty subtle, this is a little eyebrow right here, so I'm going to water that down a touch, tone it down. Let's see what we can do here. It's actually more pronounced in the reference on the lower left. We're just going to get in here and do that. I also have to enhance that highlight there by the nose. Just a touch. Okay, we'll find a few other. Now let's expand out from this. Vice versa this way. And let's get into a little bit of a darker tone here. I'm going to put some of the, essentially, those almost tiger stripes that she had on her front legs there. And again, it's pretty subtle. And I think what I'm going to do is get back to my big old brush here. And just go like this and add in a few more darks in the foreground. And then we're going to do a little of the opposite here. Right there. Something a little on the opposite. So we've been adding darks. Now we're going to add some lights over on this side. Again, back to that negative painting. Mix that together a little. Let that work its way up into the background. We need in here. That's got to be a little on the darker side, though. That's going to be too light if I use that color right there. And this is what I want to add. Just wanted to add that. And we're going to strengthen that just a touch. Strengthen that a little bit. Gonna maybe enhance some of these lighter colors on the top of the head just a bit, not a lot. And you also, with artistic license, you got to do that. Sometimes you can't just loyally follow your references into the pit. You have to sometimes adapt and make some changes. Maybe now I'll actually access some of my brightest whites here. Back to the face, right by the nose. Maybe around the eyes here. Just to really bring that out. Up here. I'm going to tone that down just a touch. That would be too much, as I'm going to do some of these coming out the ears here. A little of that. Maybe now. And this is a little watered down. Do some whiskery type things. Like this. So I don't touch this bottom edge, because if I do, then it just becomes, it's going to become too pronounced. And I'm going to do this again. Some more here. And pick up a little more light by that nose and see if I can't make this a little more pink. Ah, there's some mahogany. I'm going to grab some white. Need a little more shape to that nose. That's what I needed. Just a little bit of that. And just so that we have that color elsewhere, well, let's paint it elsewhere. And watch what we're going to do here. So I sort of laid out where those stripes are. And just every so often I pick out a spot. A little spot here and there. Now let's advance to other parts. Geez, I almost said other parts of the miniature. And you'll see me start to, like I did with the face, start to fan out like this. But see, I'm letting the canvas and the previous colors show through. I think you've seen me do that on miniatures also, especially with the Reaper Clears and that sort of thing. Let's go into the orange here. I don't want to lose, I had some nice orange going there. I don't want to lose that. So now she had kind of a collar almost of fur, you know, a mane, I guess you would, maybe was the more accurate term for it. I definitely have to say, having used this stuff, I like it as just regular 2D paint, which is funny because I see more people starting to use like artist acrylics and such on miniatures, and I'm kind of going in the opposite direction. But I don't know, I guess that's me. I guess that's what I do. Wherever everybody else is going, I'm moving in the opposite direction. But hey, that's just me being crazy, I guess. Same thing with tail here. Now, let's add a little more dimension to this tail, because we have all the darks established. Let's get in here with some of our mid-tones and lighter colors. We're going to go the opposite way over here and add a little dark there. I might need, no, I guess I don't need to put more mahogany out there. I was about to, but let's just do a few little dabs over there with the fur. And you can see we indicate things here and there. Then I see a Kathy peeking in, and she waves. Because, well, she sees Gwenny. So yeah, this is we're about 50 minutes into the painting. We both used to, well, we still do it sometimes. We used to pet sit, and there were 5 cats in this house. We usually saw Gwenny the least. She didn't really run around doing lots of playing. It was usually the other cats that did more of the running around and playing. You always, again, knew where she was. She'd either be laying on the most uncomfortable imaginable object in the house. Well, this photo here, you can see those exercise bands that she's laying on. Those things they have iron bars inside them. So I think that might tell you just questionable choices of sofas for this cat. But she would lay on top of my plastic miniature cases for whatever reason. Just somehow thought those would be comfy. I don't know. I'm going to just try and find a few. Again, some darks over here by the haunches and the knee. And just, yeah, this is the same brush I was just painting little tiny details in the eyes, which is now becoming a scumbling brush. And the other thing I like about these paints, and I think you can see just by virtue of me using them, I haven't put out any new paints except for that little bit of dark umber. I'm working with the original paints, so clearly they stay pretty workable for a long time. I like that because, well, you can see how I like to go back and forth into the midtones and such. But I don't want to lose my initial, all this underlayment here that I put around. So again, just doing some of these little bits here to make it look like the fur has actual height and texture to it. Again, that subtle thing of not wiping out what you did before. So here's another case. Let's see if I can grab a little of that mahogany over here on this cheek. When you look at both references, what am I missing? I'm missing some dark right here. And that's where I'm just going to put this in. And with each of these additions, it just starts to look more and more like Guinevere and some other, instead of some other random cat. And this is the look that you would get, especially when you were at the kitchen table and you were eating food and she would walk up and bash into your chair and darn near move you and the chair together. So what I'm going to do is pause this here for a little bit, and then we'll sort of discuss some final thoughts as I kind of get in and do these final touches. Okay, let's do some final touches and have some final thoughts here. What I'm doing is I'm going to actually put some of this back out again, just some of that bright ivory. And I've still got some of my original flesh tone color left. And I'm just going to pick out a few areas here to do something like this. I don't know if you can really see it because it's kind of the lights. There we go. That's better. You can see what I'm doing there. Just a few little modifications I'll go to the side of the brush again. And I'll even go a little more there. I'm going to do it this way so you can see it. So this way the background has a little interest in it. Foreground to a touch more activity. But it's also sort of in the opposite of the way the cat's going, and it's a little more linear this way. So it's in the opposite direction of, so it's not following all this flow of the fur. See how this fur goes out from the eye, up and down this way? Well, the foreground is just more straight up linear this way. Almost like the cat's just kind of, well, as it should be, sitting on that foreground. And we'll just do some of this. It emphasizes a little bit of some of the other angles here. So that's all. It just gives the foreground a little bit of solidity there. And just, again, while not losing what was already there, I'm just going to put some things here too. Yeah, I know it's hard for you to see all this. That's why, well, again, the more support we get on Patreon, the more I'll be able to keep adding. I do have I think I've got the cameras that I need for a new filming station, but I still have to get a new laptop machine so that I can hook all that stuff up. And I also need to some more support with things like sound, and definitely another, that still gotta get that 8 GB storage drive, because all of my terabytes, or 8 TB, sorry, not 8 GB, what am I talking about? Because I had about, I think, 8 TB to start with, and I've used up a healthy portion of that. So any support that can be offered is really handy. And for those of you that are already supporting, that is appreciated. It makes it possible for me to do stuff like this, because otherwise I would not be able to do this. And I would have to not film and do commission painting 100% of the time. And they were just using the side of the brush, and I thought something like this you might really benefit from if you have been a patron for a while. You've heard me talk about this ad nauseum, but now for the first time you actually get to see it play out. Now before I end up using all of my lighter colors here, let's see if we can get some of these. See, even that is too light. It's amazing. Just when you think, oh man, that's not going to be light enough, it's actually too light, because we established those strong value patterns right from the start. Right from the get-go. And let's make sure we've got some nice colors here. By doing this, see, it looks, we can still see some of the original orange that we put in there. And now what this does is it gives this a little more dimension as it goes over the tail. And this is the same brush I was just scumbling with a few seconds ago. And hopefully this doesn't look too distorted. I know I have to hold it kind of a wacky way for you to be able to see it, but I've got to be able to see it too, because, well, that's a minor detail there for me to have to be able to see it. So here's just, again, a few touches on the arm. Well, in this picture that I just moved down there, I was hoping you could see the tail here a little bit easier if I shifted that over, and I think that worked. So I appreciate, again, everybody that supports the Patreon page and anyone that can. I try to make sure there's something new for you every single time, that you're not just getting the same thing over and over again. And sometimes that means going a little more, going rogue and going 2D. Because I bet you didn't think you were going to get some 2D art on a miniatures page, but there you go. So again, thanks for watching. And I hope that this gives you a little bit of an insight into why I use the terms that I do. You could easily see how this could have been done in oils, but I'm glad I tried out the acrylic paints on it. That was very fun. So I think overall, oh wait, here's one last thing that I want to do. So I'm going to grab some what's left of my mahogany here, and we're going to put in the typical kind of whisker dots, as I like to call them there. Just a few. Only a couple on this side because we need to have that turn. And with that, I think we will call this Fini. Alright, so, and we'll see what we can do with this brush as far as something like this. I don't get to do this hardly ever. Yeah, this is fun. This is the last time I got a chance to do this, probably 2014. And there we go. Here, let's do this. Boom. 18. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you were able to learn a bunch from this.